With that, I want to introduce Benoit Claise, who is going to be talking about data model-driven management, the latest developments in that space. So thank you. Take it away.
All right. Thank you. So in this last session, I want to discuss data modeling-driven management. So first of all, the latest industry trends, but also some of the tools, right? So I'm Benoit, I'm with Cisco, and I've been also, for the last couple of years, an area director at the IETF in charge of this NetConf and RFCs and Yang. So what I plan to do is about maybe 10 slides, pretty quick, on what data model-driven management is, right? After that, we'll start to look at the industry developments. We'll have a demo, right, of one tool that might be useful to you, this Yang catalog there. In your journey to more automation, I'm a strong believer that this is a tool for you. And then one slide about a conclusion. So, who knows about Yang? Good. If you've never seen a Yang module, you've got one on the right-hand side there. It's basically a contract, right? A formal contract language between an NMS and a router or a switch that provides rich syntax and semantic, right? Easy to read, reusable type and grouping. You can augment the language. You can have constraint directly in the model, etc. So there are plenty of material on the web. It's not going to be a Yang tutorial, and that's about the only slide, and now you all know about Yang. So, you know, why data model-driven management, right? We've got protocols like NetConf and RFCs and gRPC, and we've got encodings like XML, JSON, protobuf, right? And we've got like programming language. So the key thing is that Yang is the data modeling language used today in the industry for networking. And I prefer to just define data modeling-driven management this way. Let's start from the top. We've got Yang as the language itself, right? And the arrow down means that we're going to develop or specify Yang data models. Exactly like in the past, we've been having like SMI and we define like modules, right? Then whenever we're going to transfer those Yang instances on the wire, we could use like the encoding being XML, JSON, protobuf, thrift, you name it, okay? Now, you're going to use a protocol, right, to discuss with your device. It could be NetConf or RFCs or gRPC, and then you start to see the arrows, right? Because with NetConf, typically you use XML. With RFCs, you use JSON, but you might be using XML if you want to, right? And yes, there are differences between those protocols. Okay, RFCs, there is no way to lock a configuration. There is no transaction. There is no like two-phase commits. Right? But the point here is that at the top, you've got the same Yang as a data modeling language. Now, if we go down as well, we could have something like the Yang development kit, and I believe it was shown to you in NANOC maybe 1 or 2 meetings ago, right? And at the bottom, you've got your own preferred programming language. Whether it's like Python, C++, Go, you name it, right? But look at the top there. That's what I want to focus on. Now, if you look on the left-hand side there, you will see a Yang module. And if you pay attention to the color coding, you will see that we have all the information that we need in order to create the RFCs primitives on the right-hand side, right? That's what we mean, that from a Yang module, we could go and create directly code, right? APIs. Now, I'm sure that you guys have been scripting, right? Somehow it's fun. You create a script, it works, and fine. Then you go back like 6 months later and you try to read it, and then there is obviously no documentation, there is no error handling, and it's a pain. What I'm going to show you here is that if you start from those models, you can create those scripts right? And whenever I see like a data model, for me, it's an API. It means that whenever we're going to update this data model in a backward compatible way, it means that our APIs will still be working. That's the beauty of this data modeling driven management. And I want to stress here, because we speak about scripting, right? That your automation is as good as your data models and your tool chain, right? In the end, if we go back to one of those previous slides, we might be choosing a different protocols for different language just because our own tool chain is in a specific language. And we're going to see that, from the left-hand side, whenever you have like a Yang module loaded into a tool, you can directly create, in this case, a Python script. And we're going to go through this. In the end, we want to automate our networks with scripting. Remember, when I see a data model in Yang, I actually see an API. Now, why should you care? Right. I'm a network management guy, right? Mainly trying to put instrumentation in the devices themselves. And I'm happy when I hear operators telling, well, if a feature cannot be automated, it does not exist. That's something that we've been pushing for years, right? But that makes me happy. This is the way to go. By the way, whenever we look at the frequency of changes in networks, and the complexity of networks today, we have no choices. We have to automate. Google was telling, there is no way that, it would be like humanly possible for people to just type the configurations any longer. Too many changes. And anyway, CLI is so 1990s. So, the transition in which we are in the industry is that we must be thinking of model first, right? If we have those models, then we could deduce the APIs, the documentation, the testing, and if someone wants a CLI, okay, fine, we could generate the CLI, right? But we must be testing through the API. We should stop thinking about the CLI as a way to configure devices. All right, industry developments. At the IETF, that's where we produce RFCs, and we've been specifying this NetConf and RESConf and Yang as a language and how you map it to JSON and XML, right? And years ago, almost like 4 years ago, we foresaw a tsunami of Yang data models in the industry. So what happened is that 4 years ago, we reorganized the steering group, the IESG, so that one person would be in charge of this transition industry. So I was the lucky winner. So I've been spending time, and I don't complain about that, right? I've been spending time on this in the last couple of years. Now, also 4 years ago, we've been telling to people, yes, there are plenty of working groups, but you don't have to create MIP modules that are read-write because they're not going to be implemented, right? I went to all my partners in Cisco Live and I asked, who is using SNMP for configuration? And I had like 2 answers. One is for IPSLA, and the other one is to put SNMP set to do an FTP of the configuration, and that's it. SNMP is not used for configuration. So we said to people in the working group, well, you should focus on NetConf and Yang if you want to have a way to automate your new features. And yes, there is that RFC there in the second bullet to translate SMI MIP modules into Yang modules, right? But it won't give you configuration. It will only give you the operational states. And then we still have an issue that the mapping, if you've got NetConf and Yang for configuration and the mapping of a translation of a MIP for operational data we don't have the same indices. It doesn't work, right? So will SNMP disappear? Well, SNMP does a good job for monitoring. And, we should not break something that works for now. However, we know SNMP is not usable for configuration, right? But there are people trying to think that maybe they want to move away from SNMP notification to telemetry, in which they would have the same data models that they've been configuring, and they could get the streaming telemetry with the same data model and close the loop of the network. My configurations apply, is my service up and running, and they get this via telemetry. Now, we foresaw this tsunami of Yang models, right? So I've been looking at all these Yang models we've got in the IETF, and I have like cron jobs every day. I validate these Yang models, and we see up to 250 Yang modules in the IETF right now in drafts, with almost 50 being RFCs and another 20 being like in the RFC editor queue. Now, what is this? This is the Yang dependency graph with all the Yang models I have in my VM on my PC, collecting all of them from the industry, right? And this is about like 2 years old. Today, it would be like a big black dot, all right? So let me spend some time on this. What you see at the center there is like a core set of Yang modules, maybe 200 or 300, that all the other ones are importing, right? So if we could standardize in the industry on how to do this interface, and VRF, and ISIS, and OSPF, and access list, and QoS, and all this, it would be great. That's what we're trying to do at the IETF. Now, the coordination is really required now because all these Yang models, they come from not only the IETF, but from OpenConfig, from IEEE, from ONF, you name it, and we're going to see this. So whenever we change one of these modules at the center, there is like a ripple effect for all the Yang modules that import that specific one. And we have to solve that right now. Because if I want to create services in my network, I must be using many of those Yang models, and they must be in sync. They must be working together now. So that's one dimension. Another one is like, well, we might have different versions of those Yang models. Regardless of how hard we try, getting those Yang models right day one is difficult, right? So new versions means a new dimension to it, more coordination. Sorry. Now, I don't want to sound like, being sad about this. This is a good problem to have. The entire industry is working on those modules right now. It's not like in SNMP in the past, where we had like one MIP module, then 2 months later, another one, etc. So this is about now that we solve this. So let's review a couple of groups working on Yang modules. Well, I mentioned the IETF. There is OpenConfig. Well, I guess you know about that. It's an operators-led group of people standardizing like Yang models. They've got like almost 130 Yang models. It's primarily led by Google. So typically, they took care of all these Yang models at the center there. Interface, and VRF, and QoS, and policies, and all this. Now, those Yang models are not aligned with the IETF. There is a design choice there, typically in the way that we do like intended and apply. So let me explain. So you want to configure BGP, right? So you could say, I'm going to send the configuration for BGP. you receive the ACK back. It means what? That the configuration was accepted. Does it mean that your BGP session is up and running? Not yet. You need to do show IP BGP and check for established, right? This is the difference between intend and apply. And in the way to design those YANG modules, well, OpenConfig took one way and the IETF took a different way. But we are monitoring the same objects. And they define like streaming telemetry also, and gRPC GNMI, which is like gRPC with protobuf. And again, as I mentioned, right, if you recall the first graph, what I care about is that we monitor the same objects in YANG. This is the key thing here. And you choose the protocol in encoding that you want to. And by the way, there is some value in protobuf, which is very efficient from an encoding point of view, at the cost of having like .proto files, right? But if you want to push a lot of data, this is efficient. Or if you want to play with a lot of entries in your routing table, that's also efficient. Now let me say a couple of things, IETF, OpenConfig. First of all, I'm pretty happy that the full industry is moving into this data model direction, right? And yes, there are differences in data models, fine. Now, on one side, OpenConfig, they have this set of YANG modules with a couple of editors who take care that all these modules are consistent together. On the other side, the IETF, we've got like maybe, we've got consensus and more eyes to this, but with certain delay. And in OpenConfig, what they try to do as well is, using configuration with, in this case, GNMI, and then getting the feedback loop via telemetry, as I mentioned before, pushing the operational data of those data models, right, and closing the loop for intent-based networking. See if the services are applied. Now, this YANG tsunami industry, right? IETF, Cable Labs, OpenConfig, IEEE, Broadband Forum, ITU. We'll discuss Open Daylight tomorrow or the day after. MEF, ETSI. All these SDOs, Standard Development Organization, and open source project are dealing with YANG models. So if I try to break down the types of YANG models we have, right, at the bottom we've got network elements YANG data models, typically the one that you see in a router, right, or a switch. And I try to break down those SDOs in open source project based on where they play. Now if you go up the stack, and by the way, you've got the RFC as a reference at the top right-hand side for those definitions. Network service YANG data models, well, we've got some with the IETF with a typical L2 VPN, L3 VPN, MEF, Open Daylight, and we might have some more business YANG models at the top. And one more thing I want to mention about those YANG models types. Well, typically in a router, we would have like standard YANG models, right? For definition of standards, de facto or SDO. But we're anyway going to have proprietary extensions to those YANG models, right? Okay, there are maybe not 10,000 ways to configure SPF, but some vendors would have a specific set of extra features on top of that. And on the right-hand side, we might have proprietary YANG models, what we call native models, right? The one coming directly from the internal of the router. Okay, those might be more complete, right? Because there is always a way to configure a router, but they're not like well, let's say designed, right? We'll come back to that. So let's look at some numbers. 50 are ratified as RFCs. Another 20 are right now in the RFC letter queue. I've got another 250 in IETF YANG modules. I've got 130 of OpenConfig. But if I do the math in my VM there, I came up with 12,000 Yang modules. Okay, I removed duplication, everything, still 2,600 Yang modules. If I remove the ones from the vendors, I still have 1,100 Yang models being worked on in open source and SDOs. This is an industry problem, right? Or expressed differently, if my glasses are full, this is the right problem to focus on right now. So we've been thinking how to organize this industry, right? So we thought about the Yang catalog where we're going to put all these Yang models, but not only the Yang models themselves, but also the related metadata. Is this mature? Is this ratified? Does it validate? Is there some code? Can I contact the author? Is there like a supporting document, et cetera, et cetera? So we based this on this draft there on the third bullet. And by the way, it's just a way to document what we've been doing. We don't plan to have an RFC out of that, right? You should consider this like an open source type of project. And by the way, everything is open source. So in this catalog, what do we have? We've got all the IETF Yang modules, Broadband Forum, IEEE, ONF, and some more. Like last week, I had like CESNET from the Czech Republic telling, can I just put my Yang modules in there? So yes, sure. So we've got some vendors in there. I'm with Cisco, so we put all these Yang models in there in the Yang catalog. But not only the Yang modules like we've been having in the past. There is GitHub, it's there. No. We've got the Yang modules, Word supported, the platforms, the features, the deviations, the capabilities, all this. This is where it starts to be interesting, right? And OpenConfig is there as well. So we started typically in IETF hackathons. Maybe like 3 years ago, simply I was starting to validate those Yang modules on a daily basis. And then we're thinking, okay, why not just put them available to everybody, right? And we started that way. All right, this Yang catalog. That's a repository of Yang tools, of Yang data models, of Yang data models metadata for the only purpose of collaborating. You know, I've been having multiple times people telling me, oh, I want to define like a MAC address or a VLAN. Okay, why don't you search in the zoo of Yang models there for, let's say, a VLAN definition. Then you look at the Yang modules, you see, oh, it comes from IEEE, it's ratified, so let me trust that one. And you just take that type def from a Yang module instead of reinventing the wheel, right? So if I put myself in the shoes of an operator, what I want to do is program my network. So I've got a couple of steps there, and we're going to show you a couple of them with the tools of at least how the tools could be helping you. All right, first thing, understand this data model-driven management concept. Okay, check. Learn NetConf, RESTconf, and Yang. So you had like one slide on Yang, you're an expert. Check. Now, where are those Yang models? We're going to see that. Now, what's more interesting is finding the right Yang models that I care about. We're going to see that. We're going to see how to experiment this from a GUI type of view, at least for the first couple of times. Testing, well, you have to do that. Then what about upgrading a device? You know, we're always afraid that if we upgrade a device, maybe the services won't be working, right? And that might be the case with native models, and I want to at least highlight this. And what's missing? Well, PubSub and telemetry, I want to just spend one slide on this one. All right, where are those Yang models? To start with, you can just search Yang and GitHub. You will find this place where per vendor, we have like iOS XR, XC, Nexus OS, and per release, we have included all these Yang models. Okay, good. Not great, but good. Where are the other ones? Well, if you want to get the standard ones from RFC, same GitHub. Or if you want to get a tar file with all the IETF Yang modules, it's there in the second bullet, or third one. And there are way more statistics over there. And don't forget, that's the beauty of this NetConf and ResConf, that whenever you connect to a device, it's going to get you the capabilities. Do I support NetConf 1.0, 1.1? Which Yang models, which deviations, which features, which capabilities, all right? Now, if you don't have a device handy, you can directly query the Yang catalog. All right. So let me do a quick demo here. Now we want to find the specific Yang modules. All right. So let's connect to this Yang catalog. I'm connected. Is there a way to share? All right. Let me try one thing here. Mm-hmm.
I think you probably have extended this.
All right. Let me quickly do that. All right. Thank you. So that's a Yang catalog. Sorry about that. And you recognize the logo over there. So a way to validate Yang modules, if you want to just test it, a way to search for the impact analysis, to look at the metadata, to have a look at the Yang exploration with the GUI, to check your W3C regex. So let's start with the Yang search. So let's pretend that you want to automate segment routing, all right? And you've got plenty of search options there. So you want to have an irregular expression, include the one coming from MIPS, only show the latest one. Okay, I'm going to say only module name. I want Yang 1.1 and 1.0. And by the way, you've got plenty of Yang keywords in there, so let's make it very simple. What I want to do is search on segment routing. It's going to tell me all the different Yang modules. And you see in there the Yang module with a couple of names there. This is the revision. Now, what is more interesting to me is this type of fields there. We've been trying to show you a couple of them that you might consider as health metric. Where did it come from? What is the maturity level? Is it imported by other Yang modules? Is it pass validation? So, let me check on IETF as an organization. Oh, I see one called IETF segment routing there. Okay, it's adopted, not yet ratified. It passed validation. It's imported by other Yang modules. So let me have a look at the tree view there. The tree view, let me expand everything. It's basically looking into the Yang module. All right. So is this what I want? Okay, what is this one? All right, this is the originating router ID of this sRGB block. Okay, exactly what I want. And by the way, you see on the right-hand side directly the path that you want to introduce if you have ResConf. Now, let me check the module detail here. So I've been telling that what's important is to get all these metadata. So I've got the name, the revision, it comes from the IETF, the working group is Spring, this is the namespace, the schema is here. I can directly have a look, download it, play with it. Generated from? Well, it's not a native model. It's not generated. So it's not applicable. It's adopted. It comes from this document. I could directly contact the authors. All right. Module classification. This is like a network element or a service YANG module. And that brings a good point that some of those metadata, I could extract them directly from YANG modules. Some of them have to be populated. Now, if you search for only service YANG modules, that would be the key field to search on. All right. Again, some more contacts. It's a module and the submodules, the 3 type. Remember, I mentioned that we've got different design between OpenConfig and IETF. This is the field. In the IETF, we call that NMDA, so this one is NMDA compatible. Why is it important? If you start playing with automation, you want to play with the same group of YANG models, right? So again, that's something to pay attention to. And we'll show you how to query all these fields directly with APIs. Okay, and we keep adding new fields all the time. Every single time there's a new use case. Recently, we added expire with a date, and expired was the Boolean, true or false. I don't care about expire YANG modules, right? The dependency, well, it gives you all the different YANG modules that are imported by these guys and that these guys import in both directions. And we've got like a two semantic fields, right, based on semver. I will come back to that. Semver is major, minor, and patch. So as we keep every single version of the YANG modules in there, it's going to tell you if there's a differences with the previous version in terms of backward compatibility. And implementation, well, it's something quite interesting, right? Okay, this one is not implemented, but let me take, for example, what I know is implemented. Okay, let's take this CDP one, whatever the example here. And it's going to show you at the bottom all the different places where it's implemented. And I can tell that people are doing tests right now. So typically, all right. So it tells me that I have to upgrade my AWS. Anyway, in there you would see typically things like on this router, it's implemented on that version of IOSXR, et cetera, et cetera. All right. Now, let's go back to the presentation. So you know how to find your YANG module now, at least the one you care about. So we've seen that those metadata are quite important. And I want to change what I said. I said automation is as good as your data model, your tool chain, and I want to add as good as the YANG modules metadata, the health metric I mentioned there, right? Typically, implementation status, is there a contact, who can I email to for an issue, et cetera, et cetera. Now the impact analysis. Let's go back to the demo. This is like the dependent that I've been showing you, right? So, all right. In the IETF, I cared about all these YANG modules that are about, TLS and SSH and client and server. And I wanted to review all of them in one pack. And these are all the ones there. Now, if I want to standardize those YANG modules, I want to know what the next bottleneck is. And this is this black arrow there, this black circle there. And you see the color coding there. You see if it's adopted, if it fails compilation, if it's ratified. Okay, so the one in blue are ratified. Okay, that's an RFC, and I have to care about that one. This one is an RFC as well. Okay, and I have to care about that one. Same thing here. And the bottleneck is this guy. All right, let me click on it. And I would see that, this one is right now in the RFC queue. So I don't care about this one. It's done. However, I see that this one is red, means it fails compilation, right? So I could just go directly in the Yang catalog or via this guy here and see, give me the catalog entry for that Yang module. And we would end up exactly in the catalog, and we could see where it failed. It's going to provide us all the information. We've got 4 validators for the Yang module over there. All right. So the other one I want to show you in terms of impact analysis is this one, the IETF interface. Okay, so I want to see who is importing this IETF interface. Well, many people there, right? So, and it started to be interesting for me. Okay, who is importing it? Broadband Forum, IEEE, OpenConfig, Cisco, and some more. So if we're thinking to update this IETF interface, we have this coordination job that we have to do to reach out to all these people and telling, watch out, we're going to update this IETF interface in a backward or non-backward compatible way, and that makes a difference. And play with all these. You can select, oh, BBF, I want to contact them. You can select on this filter and see all the Yang models over there. And I will show you APIs to get the same information directly. I was in a meeting with IEEE, and I could directly from the APIs get all the latest version of the IEEE Yang modules and show all the ones that were not validating. Pretty easy. All right. So this is the impact analysis. And that's what I want to show here, that this is basically a JSON file with all information here for tracking dependencies and dependent. Now let's experiment with a GUI, right? If you still don't believe me that a Yang module is an API, let's see this. So, all right, I've got this. Oh, let's take the IETF interface. All right. I want to get the detail, and I want to click on Yang Suite here. Right, and whenever you do this, this is this picture that you will get. I want to do a bit faster here. So you click on the IETF interface, and you say, well, what I would like to do is I want to edit my config, and I want to create Ethernet 0 with description of my interface. You just generate the script, and you've got the Python scripts here based on YDK, and you know about YDK from a previous meeting, that will do exactly what I put on the GUI there. So, okay, what have we done so far? We went through the zoo of Yang modules. We selected the one which is segment routing in this case, right? We checked that the metadata are about right. We check it's implemented. Okay, we want to test it. Then we look into this GUI, we look at the segment routing Python script, and boom, we can go and test. All right? Now, in YDK, in the end, you don't need to have this GUI. You could directly load your Yang module, and with this YDK gen, you got like in Python or C++ or since last week in Go, directly your scripts. Okay, then you've got variables in there that are basically the leaves in the Yang module. You set those, and off you go. All right, semantic versioning. I mentioned that. What if I upgrade my router and I'm relying on native models? Those native models are based on the internal of the routers, right? So it might happen that upgrading the internal will change and your scripts won't be working any longer. So what we've been doing here is a way to at least warn you in advance, right? So if you recall those two SEMVer, semantic versioning fields in there, we've got two flavors. The first one is, if like in OpenConfig, you have that field in the Yang module, we extract it and we tell you this version compared to the previous one is or not backward compatible. Or we could derive the same information directly from a PSAMP plugin. And we're going to let you know. So if you've got like services based on specific Yang modules, and you want to upgrade one of the routers over there, it will tell you if your service might be impacted. It's kind of key, right? Now, with standard models, normally they are updated in a backward compatible way, so it should be fine. All right. So what we did with this project is defining a Yang module to manage Yang modules. So we've been eating our own dog food, which means that we've got all the APIs available, right, directly to query the Yang module, the Yang catalog. And you can download all these scripts directly with the last bullet point there. So let me show you. So this is Postman. Going to the Yang catalog. So let's say I would like to get, okay, all the Yang modules that are available on iOS, so ISR 4K running that iOS version. It's a simple get, right? And what you see here is the list in a JSON format of all the different Yang modules, and by the way, including the capabilities and deviations and everything. And that's what we want you to do, ideally, to integrate this catalog directly into your tool chain, right? Okay, let's pretend that you want to get all OpenConfig modules in this ASR 9K with that version. Okay, it's a post now, where you say organization OpenConfig on this vendor with this iOS XR on ASR 9K. And it gets you all the Yang modules, again, in JSON format, right? So maybe I'm going fast, right? But I will be available the next 2 days for any questions. So this is what we want to do. If you don't have a router handy, you just do a query over there. It will get you all information. And you can do your own query based on the fields you want. And then we could develop, it's open source, by the way, you just can get it and extend to it. Check the semantic differences between this ASR 9K, 611 and 631. It's going to tell you all the Yang modules that are not backward compatible, just in case you want to upgrade from 611 to 613, right? So again, this is an API, but I want you to look at all the metadata we've been showing you and imagine the use case that you have. And just imagine that you've got this API directly to answer all these questions. Another one in there, I had one operator telling me, you know, I've got like those PE routers, and one of them is iOS XE, the other one is iOS XR. What are the Yang models you've got in common between those two platforms and those two iOS versions? Okay, it's a small script in the catalog with a post in there, done, right? So pretty easy. All right. Just to prove you it's a Yang model, this is the Yang model to manage all these Yang models. And you know, if you have new use cases, for us it's very easy. We update these Yang modules. It's, by the way, confd. we load it, we've got all the APIs directly available, we code it, and that's it. Piece of cake, right? All right, if you're a Yang module designer, typically you would use the validator tool. Then you would check the regular expression there, and it says to be done, but actually it's in there already. And then you post an IETF draft, you post in GitHub, you can directly get the APIs and post your Yang module in the catalog, and it's in there, right? So two types of metadata, the one you can extract and the one that you have to set. Like typically the broadband forum had to set that this series of Yang modules is like ratified, for example. And if you're a Yang module user, you do exactly what I explained. You search in the database, you look at the metadata, you look at the module 3, you look at the dependency, you use the Yang suite, and you can generate the Python code directly. All right? Now, question, who should know about Yang, right? In the IETF, I always speak about Yang and Yang and Yang, but in the end, the thing we want to do is to hide those Yang modules for the people who don't need to know. That's exactly what I've been showing, right? If you're an operator and just want to use the APIs, this is the Yang catalog there. It's only in case that you want to define your own new services that you have to know about Yang. Service on top of an orchestrator and a controller. Or if you are an architect, you want to design your new features based on Yang. Otherwise, well, okay, you don't have to know or to write a Yang module. Now, one slide about telemetry, because I've been hearing like telemetry and streaming telemetry many, many times in the last years. And there is like hardware-based telemetry, there is device-level telemetry, there is data model telemetry, there is business telemetry. Everything is telemetry, exactly like my NetFlow records were telemetry because I'm pushing something. My message is the only telemetry in which I believe is the one which is data model driven, based on Yang. Why? We're going to configure those devices. You get it now, it must be done with NetConf, RESCOM, gRPC, but based on Yang. Whenever we're going to push things, we want to have the same data model, right? So it has to be Yang-based. You know, I spent 20 years in network management, and I'm kind of fed up to try to map a AAA record and a flow record with a SNMP IF index, with a Yang something, with a NAS port, etc. We lose so much time trying to map those data models, right? So the only one I care about is data model-driven telemetry. With one exception, there is hardware-based telemetry, and sometimes we have to push so much data directly from hardware that a mapping to Yang on a box is not always possible if you want to do line rate. That's the only exception. All right, conclusion, and I believe I'm on time. All right, automation is required these days. Too many changes, the frequency of those changes goes like high, networks are getting complex. For networking, Yang is the data modeling language of choice. I see a Yang model, I see an API, right? So, okay, you only have to know Yang if you want to design your services. Keep in mind that your automation is as good as your data model, their metadata, and your tool chain. And I want to finish with two things. Yang is being worked on, Yang data models is being worked on in many different SDOs and open source projects right now. And as operators, this Yang catalog is there for you just to help you. And with this, I thank you. Do you have time for questions, Chris? A few questions. So it was all clear. Thank you.